Easter. No, yeah, they are, but I don't need them.
Oh, okay, cool.
That's,
Well, you'd like to leave them up here, right?
Yeah, that's for when I,
Special then to do something more.
whoops. It's when I come to church, like in the middle of the week to practice and I have hiking boots on or something.
Oh, yeah.
Then I can't play the pedals with those. But I can play with these.
All right, cool.
Well, it's 10:30, time to start.
Good morning. Welcome and happy Easter. My name is Beth Manchester Howell and I'm the lay leader this morning. I'd like to welcome everyone to First Parish Unitarian Universalist Church of Bridgewater. I've been a member here for 22 years, and what I like most about this congregation is the way we honor our Christian ancestors and also honor our individual search for truth. First Parish Bridgewater is a welcoming congregation. We proudly fly the rainbow flag to symbolize our welcome to people of every description. We have a dynamic religious education program which takes place in the lower parish hall during worship. If you are new to First Parish, we hope you enjoy your visit with us, and we encourage you to sign the guest book at the table at the rear of the sanctuary. If you wish to receive our monthly newsletter, please be sure to include your email address. If you're joining us online, you can request to be put on our mailing address list at our website or in the chat. We invite you to join us for coffee, snacks, and conversation in the upper parish hall to your right following the service. Our service this morning is being hosted via Zoom and recorded for Bridgewater Cable TV, but the camera is turned off during the sharing of joys and sorrows. In case of an emergency, please leave the building either through the main sanctuary doors or through the School Street entrance if you need a ramp. You are welcome here. Thank you for joining us. Your presence, whether in person or online, makes a difference. I would like to now share a few announcements. There will be a change of hymn in the order of service. Our final hymn will be number 1030, Siyamba. And we would like to remind you to wear your name tag during the service and during coffee hour. So if you didn't put your name tag on for the service, you have time before coffee hour to go grab it. I am actually wearing Evie's name tag today because it was the closest one I could find. So if you, like me, have parted ways with your name tag, Michaela is the person to contact to get a new name tag. And a reminder to church members who are Bridgewater residents to vote on Saturday, April 23rd for school committee at the new fire station. See Sam for more info. And from the Green Sanctuary Committee, this Friday, April 22nd is Earth Day. Please join us and members of BCCR and a climate standout at 4 o'clock on the Bridgewater Town Common by the Walgreens corner. Please contact Deb Baumgarten with questions. We will have some signs or bring your own. Thank you. We will now have the prelude. We will now light our chalice, the symbol of our UU faith. We light our chalice to mark our sacred time together. As we gather in this beautiful historic sanctuary, we are connected to the many generations that have come here to find the divine. And right outside these walls and brought in to our altar, we are surrounded by daffodils, flowering trees, and tulips. Let us consciously invite the spirit of rebirth into our time together. Tradition and new beginnings bring comfort, wonder, and joy. Let us all also find these things in our relationship to each other. Let us worship together. Please join me in the words of our covenant.
Love is the spirit of this church, and service its gift. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to speak the truth in love, and to help one another.
friends. I am Reverend Jennifer Johnson. It's my great privilege to serve this warm and engaging congregation as your minister, and it is a great privilege to be here with you on this Easter Sunday morning, my first Easter with you. And I have opening words from our Unitarian Universalist minister, the Reverend Dr. Richard Gilbert. A tomb is no place to stay, be it a cave in the Judean hills or the dark cavern of the spirit. A tomb is no place to stay when fresh grass rolls away the stone of winter cold and valiant flowers burst their way to warmth and light. A tomb is no place to stay when each morning announces our reprieve. As we know, we are granted yet another day of living. A tomb is no place to stay when life laughs a welcome to hearts that have been away too long. And so let our hearts sing together this morning. Our opening hymn is number 269, Lo, the Day of Days is Here.
Now is the time in our service for the sharing of joys. Good thing there were two. Now is the time in our service for sharing joys and sorrows, those matters great and small that touch us, our families, and those we love. You can come up and light a candle and share your joy or concern, or you can light a candle in silence.
I am reminded by your sharing that the truth of human suffering persists, that the shared challenges of humanity continue. Terrible diseases, uncured, pandemic, unending, it seems. Homelessness persists, and poverty, and we know war rages. And yet, new life arrives. New joy is born through it all. And here we come to hold that complicated truth, that central tension of being human beings together. Here we come to this sacred space, shaping together this sacred time to hold with reverence and compassion all those joys and sorrows that are shared aloud and all those uttered wordlessly in spirit. Let us take a moment to breathe and to feel and simply to be together, a holy communion of hearts. Share with you this prayer by the Reverend Julia Hamilton. Spirit of hope, settle into our bones on this Easter morning. Remind us once again that the dawn light is never a gamble. If there ever was a sure bet, it is the sunrise. Even stones crumble, even grief changes and shifts, and death is a mystery that is certain but not solid. But hope is like the sunrise, eternal and bone-bred within us. We are creatures built by sunshine and cannot carve this hope out of our bones if we tried. And yet people have tried to seal off the morning. Emperors and kings, priests and patriarchs have brought down death, certain but not solid, on anyone who points to a new dawn. In these fearful moments, we can be forgiven if we stumble and doubt and deny, but still the sun rises and calls her children into bloom. Always, she says, always I will return. So don't despair. All is not lost. The small ways of the petty tyrants never win. So place your money on the sunrise. Who are we to bet against glory? Now we have a story, a beautiful story fit for this season of the miracles of renewal. And Lisa Troy will lead us with support from Jenny Donahue.
As Reverend Jennifer said, this story celebrates the discovery of miracles. Babushka lived alone in a dacha, a little house in the country, but she was known far and wide for the fine eggs that she lovingly painted. Her eggs were so beautiful that she always won first prize at the Easter festival in Moscow. Each day, Babushka would take the shell of an egg from her basket and paint it in wonderful designs, using the shapes of stars and flowers, triangles and circles. Through the long, cold winter, Babushka painted. Then one day after a snowstorm, Babushka went outside. She could still hear the faint sound of falling snow. Herds of caribou were there feeding at Babushka's because the grasses they usually ate were covered with snow. "A miracle," she whispered as she fed some. "These wild things have found their way to me." Just then, a flock of noisy geese honked loudly overhead. As they glided over the snow, one of them faltered and fell from the sky. Babushka went to where the goose lay crumpled in the snow. "A hunter did this," Babushka grumbled. She carefully picked up the goose and took it back to her little house. There, she fed the little goose from her own table and put the goose in her basket lined with the warmest quilt from her own bed. "I shall name you a good name, one that we both can like, my little friend. How do you like Rachenka?" "Yes, then Rachenka it will be." With Babushka's care, Rachenka grew stronger as each day passed. To repay her kindness, Rachenka laid an egg for breakfast every morning. As Rachenka got better, she waddled around the little house, exploring every nook, cupboard, and corner. One day, she jumped on top of Babushka's work table, overturning the jars of bright-colored paint that she used to color the eggs. "Niet!" Babushka screamed as she shushed her away. "Niet!" The frightened goose flapped her wings to get away and knocked over the basket of eggs that Babushka had so lovingly painted. The eggs crashed onto the floor and shattered into millions of pieces. They were both very sad. There was no reason now for Babushka to go to the festival. The next morning, Babushka slowly got out of bed and trundled over to Rachenka's basket to get her morning egg. But when she reached into the middle of the quilt, she picked out the most brilliantly colored egg that she had ever seen. "A miracle," Babushka whispered. "A miracle." Then she held the egg up to the morning light and marveled at its beauty. After that, every morning for 12 mornings, there was another egg, each more beautiful than the one laid the day before. Soon, Babushka had enough eggs to take to the festival. How wonderful, she thought. A miracle had replaced the eggs that were broken. Spring is here, my little friend, Babushka said to Rodchenko the morning of the festival. Soon you will be flying off to the north and to your flock. She bustled to the hearth fire and brewed some of her favorite tea. The two shared a saucer of tea with kulich, a sweet Easter bread. She covered each piece with pashka, a spread of cheese, butter, and raisins. Yum. They savored each bit together. Oh, my little friend, I shall sorely miss you, but you are a wild thing, and a miracle sent you to me. It would not be right to ask you to stay here with me forever. When Babushka left her little house for the festival, she took one long last look at Rodchenko and waved goodbye. She crossed Lubitov Valley where the caribou mothers were walking with their newborn calves. A miracle, she thought. New little lives. A miracle. The festival was bright and exciting. There were goat carts selling kulich, processions, dancers, and jugglers. Babushka showed her old friends the beautiful eggs. Look at them, the elders said. They almost glow as if the paint is part of the shell itself. The judges picked Babushka's eggs as the most beautiful, and Babushka was very happy. She beamed as she looked at the first prize, a feather bed quilt. As Babushka made her way homeward, a honking flock of geese flew overhead. Babushka gave them a long, lingering look and wondered if Rodchenko was with them. When Babushka arrived home that evening, Rodchenko was gone. Alone, she put the new quilt on her little bed. She brewed a cup of tea, ate the last of the kulich and pashka, got into bed with her favorite book of poems, and fell fast asleep. But that night, Babushka was awakened from a sound sleep by an ever so small sound. It was coming from Rodchenko's basket. She hobbled closer and saw a glorious egg, but this one was different from all the others. It quivered and moved. It made tiny, muffled sounds. The egg jumped, bumped, rolled, and pitched in the basket. Then there was a crack, and Babushka could see the very special gift that Rodchenko had left for her. All a miracle, Babushka said. And this little goose remained with Babushka always. The end.
A hard act to follow, Lise. Very nice, very good. So it's time in our order of service, if you'll read, that it's the Easter egg parade. And I just wanted to share with you a little of the history. If you're an old member or a new member, maybe you don't quite know how this has come to be. So I'm going to just put it all out there on the timeline for you. So my stepfather, the Reverend Dr. Robert L.H. Miller, whose name I want to fix on the back of the, it needs to be fixed back there. He was an interim minister here in the early 90s, married to my mother, who was the director of religious education in Duxbury. And in the Duxbury church, she had created, like in 1975, this egg tree thing. And my brother is an arborist, and so he would always cut down a branch or use one that had been cut down, and they just kept growing and growing their egg trees. So that kind of came here via some of my family. So my children are here today, and we set it up yesterday. We've been doing this forever, but we have always saved the eggs from year to year to year, and there are some from Kelsey and Alyssa when they were super little, and I think Dick Fuchs' wife Ellie has one up there, and I remember putting one up that said Tedesco. So just, and there's a lot of Patrick and Jocelyn Donahue. There's even Pam and James. Harvey's up there as a child, so there's lots of great memories, and it's part of this widening our circle concept that, you know, we just keep growing, we keep growing. So it is a delicate, fragile process, okay? So when we come up, there are some up here. If you haven't brought your own, there are some up here, and the lower branches are just the place for you to kind of reach. If you're feeling particularly spriteful or agile and want to try to come up on the stage, I don't think we need more than 1 or 2 people up there at a time. It's just, there's just so much going on up there. The lower branches are available, but also recognize that you can slide yours all the way to the end so that there's more room for people to place them. So kind of have that symbiotic flow as the parade goes on. And I think Denise has a lovely tune for us. All right. I'll guide you. So why don't we kind of organize ourselves to walk this way, because I'm going to be off mic now. But you'll be walking and you're going to go this way, or you'll be walking and like this whole, look at this, all for you. Okay? All right. Take this way.
first Easter egg parade. Beautiful. And thank you, Lisa, for that lovely story that really also honors the culture of the land of Ukraine, as our hearts are with all those who are suffering there. It is now the time in our service for our sacrament. I do believe that Unitarian Universalists have sacraments. They just look a little different. So we have a sacrament of generosity. Each Sunday when we give to the plate, we give with intention to serve this spiritual community and the wider world. Our giving, when we give in this time and in this way, is an act of faith in the beloved community we seek to build together, day by day, gift by gift, act by act, and relationship by relationship. And this month, and in the month of May, we'll be sharing our plate collection, as is your tradition, with Kids to Camp. Kids to Camp is First Parish's environmental justice project, and it funds a week of camp for children and youth at Nature Resource Trust's Sheep Pasture in Easton. So if you would like to make a donation to Kids to Camp, make your check out to First Parish, and you can note Kids to Camp in the memo line. And we thank you, we honor your generosity and your faithfulness. The morning offering will now be given and most gratefully received. We have 3 brief readings for you this morning because it's Easter. And Beth is going to help me out. She'll be offering the 2 readings from Scripture.
Our first reading is from the book of Ezekiel, chapter 37, verse 1 through 3. The hand of the Lord was on me, and he brought me out of the spirit of the Lord and set me in the middle of a valley. It was full of bones. He led me back and forth among them. I saw a great many bones on the floor of the valley, bones that were very dry. He asked me, "Son of man, can those bones live?" And our second reading is from the book of Matthew, chapter 22, verse 5 through 7. The angel said to the women, Do not be afraid, for I know you are looking for Jesus who was crucified. He is not here, he has risen, just as he said. Come and see the place where he lay. Then go quickly and tell his disciples, he has risen from the dead and is going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him. Now I have told you.
And our third and final reading is an excerpt from a poem by Frances Ellen Watkins Harper from the 19th century America called Bury Me in a Free Land. Make me a grave where'er you will, in a lowly plain or a lofty hill. Make it among earth's humblest graves, but not in a land where men are slaves. I could not rest if around my grave I heard the steps of a trembling slave. His shadow above my silent tomb would make it a place of fearful gloom. I would sleep, dear friends, where bloated might can rob no man of his dearest right. My rest shall be calm in any grave where none can call his brother a slave. I ask no monument proud and high to arrest the gaze of the passers-by. All that my yearning spirit craves is bury me not in a land of slaves. So ends our readings. it is to have our choir back. Thank you. And happy Easter, dear friends. Spring, as we have reflected, is upon us. The daffodils are in bloom. The scent of hyacinth is sweet in the air. Trees and fields are greening. Magnolia, cherry blossoms, and forsythia dot the landscape with cheerful bursts of pink and yellow. A chorus of birdsong once again greets the rising sun. It is the season of awakening, renewal, and new birth. At Easter time, we Unitarian Universalists embrace the symbols and signs of renewal, spring's awakening after the dormancy of winter. And yet, while Christian celebrations of Easter also often include and embrace the imagery of renewal, the heart of the Easter celebration in Christianity is about something, well, different. Not renewal, but resurrection. Not new life, but return from death to life here on earth. I suspect the Easter sermon writing process inspires much head scratching and hands frozen over the keyboard angst for UU clergy, especially for newbies like me. Resurrection is a hard concept for many UUs, and ministers are no exception. Easter is the most significant holiday at the center of the Christian tradition from which our Unitarian Universalist faith emerged. Yet how do we contemporary UUs draw meaning and inspiration from a holiday with a miracle at its center, when so many of us shrink from the very concept of miracles? The first time I tried, it didn't go so well. I was tasked with sharing the Easter story for a children's chapel service at my home congregation. The crowd was tough, about a dozen school-aged Unitarian Universalist youth. I knew I had completely lost them when one of the boys yelled out, "You mean Jesus was a zombie?" The kids got hung up on the supernatural dimensions of the story, and they couldn't get past it. I think that happens for a lot of UU adults too, inclined as we are towards the use of reason, regard for science, and reverence for the natural world. Can these bones live? God asked the Hebrew prophet Ezekiel ages before Christ's followers discovered his empty tomb. Can life come back from death? I'm sure the boy from my children's chapel would have had a quick, smart aleck retort to God's question. But what if God was getting at something a bit more nuanced? What answers might we discover if we let go of our hang-ups and stay with the question, with our reason firmly intact, but also with a spirit of openness and curiosity? What might we learn from the idea of resurrection that is relevant to our lives and our struggles and our hopes in our Unitarian Universalist faith today? To explore this question, I'm going to invite you to consider 3 stories of resurrection, which we alluded to, we shared glimpses of in the readings. Taken together, they call us not to believe in resurrection in a physical, material sense, but rather to practice resurrection. To practice resurrection in a spiritual and ethical way. Our first story is the one I've already alluded to from Hebrew scripture, the book of Ezekiel. Ezekiel was a Jewish prophet in the 6th century before the Common Era, exiled in Babylon with his fellow Judeans after the fall of the temple in Jerusalem. The Jews in Babylon at this time are hopeless and despairing, cut off as they are from their land, their temple, and the practice of their faith. In this context, God comes to Ezekiel and shares a vision of resurrection in the valley of the dry bones. The hand of the Lord was on me, and he brought me out by the Spirit of the Lord and set me in the middle of a valley. It was full of bones. He led me back and forth among them, and I saw a great many bones on the floor of the valley, bones that were very dry. He asked me, "Son of man, can these bones live?" God goes on to show Ezekiel the answer. "I will make breath enter you, and you will come to life. I will attach tendons to you and make flesh come upon you and cover you with skin. I will put breath in you, and you will come to life." So I prophesied as he commanded me, Ezekiel says. And as I was prophesying, there was a noise, a rattling sound, and the bones came together, bone to bone, and breath entered them. They came to life and stood up on their feet, a vast army. There you have it, a vast army of enfleshed, breathing former skeletons marching out of their mass grave. Alas, we've arrived at the part of the story where the Chalice Chapel kids start cracking jokes about zombies. The part where I lose them and maybe some of you. Except it's not the end of the story, for God goes on to explain to Ezekiel the meaning of the resurrected bones. "Son of man, these bones are the people of Israel. These bones are the people of Israel, your exiled people here. They say, 'Our bones are dried up and our hope is gone, we are cut off.' Therefore prophesy to them. Say to them, 'This is what the sovereign Lord says. My people, I am going to open your graves and bring you up from them. I will bring you back to the land of Israel. I will put my spirit in you, and you will live, and I will settle you in your own land.'" The resurrection that matters in this story is not so much the literal resurrection of dry bones. God explains that the vision of resurrected bones represents the people of Israel, who in their exile have died a spiritual death, a death of hope, a death of faith. The resurrection of the dry bones makes manifest an invisible spiritual resurrection, the restoration of the exiled Israelites' covenant with God. The resurrection is not the completion of the miracle. It rather points towards the future, where the Israelites are brought back to their own land, restored to their rightful relationship with their God according to their covenant, re-enlivened, resurrected by God's Spirit. The exiled Israelites are called to live and breathe and practice their faith into the promise of the future. They are the resurrected. Our second story brings us to another tomb, another grave, the one at the center of the Easter story, as told in the Gospel of Matthew. It is the Sunday morning after Jesus was crucified, and Mary Magdalene and another so-called other Mary have made their way to the tomb, prepared to ritually anoint Jesus' body with spices according to their Jewish customs. Except when they arrive, the stone is rolled away as if by an earthquake. Instead of the body of Jesus within, they encounter an angel of the Lord who delivers a striking message. "Do not be afraid, for I know that you are looking for Jesus who was crucified. He is not here. He has risen just as he said. Come and see the place where he lay. Then go quickly and tell his disciples, He has risen from the dead and is going ahead of you to Galilee. There you will see him." The women, having delivered their message, the disciples gather in Galilee as instructed, where Jesus appears before them. When they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted. Then Jesus came to them and said, "All authority in heaven and earth has been given to me." Jesus rises from death and appears before his disciples to assert his divine authority, but he doesn't come back to earth to stay, at least not in body. He does not remain on earth walking and preaching and teaching alongside his disciples in the flesh. His bodily resurrection is short-lived before his ascension to heaven. Rather, he comes back with a charge, a mission for his followers. While the women and the disciples are caught in the spell of the miracle, at turns both worshipful and doubtful, Jesus, it seems to me, is all business. He cuts right to the chase. For Jesus, his resurrection has a clear-eyed purpose. He has returned from death to charge his followers with the mission of spreading his message and his ministries. The final passage of the book of Matthew is known as the Great Commission. "Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always, to the very end of the age." The resurrection that is meant to endure after the miracle is not the bodily resurrection of Christ, but rather the resurrection of his message and his ministry. He will be with his followers always, to the end of the age, not in body, but rather in spirit, in their hearts, as they live and breathe and carry out his promise, his spirit, in their words and deeds. These two stories from the scriptural traditions at the foundation of Unitarian Universalism give us an understanding of resurrection that is more than a suspect miracle of the dead rising from the grave. The story invites us as spiritual descendants to resurrect the promises, the wisdom, the work, and the love of the ancestors who lived and died before us. They invite us to give our living energy, our tendons and muscles and bones to their spirits. Still, these stories may be remote and obscure to some of us, especially if we do not come from or have left behind a Jewish or Christian identity. So for our third and final story, I want to visit the life of and death of a more recent Unitarian prophet, Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, whose life and legacy may be more accessible to our sensibilities and more relevant to our spiritual and moral concerns today. Harper was a Christian with dual denominational affiliations. She was a lifelong member of the African Methodist Episcopal Church, but later also joined the Unitarians in Philadelphia, likely attracted by their leadership in abolition. Frances Harper, you may recall from a previous sermon, was a Black woman freeborn. In her Christian faith, we observe priorities that align with our contemporary UU values and principles. Our cherished belief in the inherent worth and dignity of all human beings, our commitment to serve the cause of justice and liberation for all siblings in the human family, our longing for the beloved community, where all human beings, in all our glorious diversity, are assured of our belonging. Harper worked and wrote and spoke and ministered tirelessly to bring these values that were rooted in her own Christian faith, in the teachings of Jesus. She worked tirelessly to bring these values to their full fruition, She was a nationally renowned poet and writer of fiction, a lecturer, an abolitionist, a suffragist, a mother, and a Sunday school teacher. Even though she lived to see the end of the Civil War and the formal end of the American system of chattel slavery, her work was not complete when she died in 1911. Southern white legislators had cruelly reversed the political and economic gains Black people made during Reconstruction. Jim Crow segregation and its attendant violence and terror were on the rise. Women had yet to win the vote, and Black men across the country were increasingly disenfranchised. And we know we have not fixed this problem yet. In her 1854 poem, Bury Me in a Free Land, Harper foresees the possibility of her death before the full liberation of her people. Make me a grave where'er you will, in a lowly plain or a lofty hill. Make it among earth's humblest graves, but not in a land where men are slaves. All that my yearning spirit craves is bury me not in a land of slaves. I read this poem, Bury Me in a Free Land, as Harper's great commission to us, her spiritual and national descendants. In the poem, she addresses the living at the imagined time of her death, as Jesus addressed his disciples at the time of his death. Reminiscent of the Easter story, Harper invokes a tomb, one where she cannot rest, she cannot stay, for her work is not done, the kingdom of God has not arrived, the beloved community is not complete. Her message and ministry must live on. While slavery was nominally abolished at the time of her death, the land was not yet fully free, nor is it today, as we so starkly have been reminded by the very recent killing of Patrick Lyoya in Grand Rapids, yet another Black man fatally shot by a police officer during a traffic stop. Sadly, in many respects, Harper's yearning spirit was buried along with her body. For decades, her work and legacy were dismissed, neglected by historians, scholars, and activists, buried in a tomb of forgotten history by the forces of white supremacy and patriarchy that animated her resistance in her lifetime. Yet true to her word, Harper's spirits could not rest, and she called out from the grave to future generations of Black feminist scholars and Black Unitarian Universalists. And through their research, they uncovered Harper's life work and breathed new energy into her legacy through their scholarship, ministries, and activism. And this brings me to my favorite part of Harper's story, and to yet another gravesite. Modern-day UUs learned that Harper's body was buried in a humble place, an unmarked grave at Eden Cemetery in Philadelphia. In 1992, a group of African-American UUs made a pilgrimage to the gravesite to give her the memorial she was due. When they unsettled the dirt to place the newly engraved stone they brought with them, they discovered that an original stone had in fact been placed at the grave, but had toppled over and been buried beneath decades of earth and grass. As they raised the stone from the grave, they both literally and metaphorically resurrected Harper's legacy. And while this moment of poetic drama is moving, the true meaning of the story is not about a literal resurrection, but a spiritual one. Just as God and Jesus pointed to the Israelites and to the disciples to live out the promise of their ancestors, Harper's prophetic message is also future-oriented. In a brief poem that closes her most famous novel, Iola Leroy, She invokes that promised future where her vision of liberation is fully realized. There is light beyond the darkness, joy beyond the present pain. Though the morning seems to linger over the hilltops far away, yet the shadows bear the promise of a brighter coming day. Let us, Harper's faithful UU descendants, carry out her great commission. Let us move towards that brighter coming day, living out the resurrection of her legacy in our lives and ministries, with our hearts and spirits, our hands and feet, our very muscles and bones. Let us march into the light of that brighter coming day, for we are the resurrected. And now, let us sing. Number 1030, Sia Humba. You may have gathered that Frances Ellen Watkins Harper is a really important ancestor in my spiritual life. I actually encountered her before I became a Unitarian Universalist as a student of the literature of women in the 19th century U.S. And in some ways, she set me on the path to ministry. I left scholarship and academia because of Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, because of the way she lived her life, not in an ivory tower, but in the churches, in the communities, on the ground, marching, preaching. And so the closing words I'm going to share with you are words that I wrote in her honor. Can these bones live? No, they said with smiles, wry and knowing, quite certain of their reason. The dead are buried and gone. Dry bones turn to dust. There is no resurrection. But what of the pilgrims who made their sacred journey to the unmarked grave where a prophet lies? They turn the earth and raise the stone that bore her name. But what of the scholars who revived her poems long unsung and rescued her stories, dusty and fading from forgotten shelves? But what of her words that sound once more to pierce our ears with the bitter cries of the enslaved mother. Across time and space and death, her spirit moves a new generation. Ancient words rise from dust to fire living neurons. Her words travel the pathways of our nerves to muscle, tendon, and bone, impelling us forward once more on the long march to justice. God asks us, children of creation, can these bones live? And the people answer, ours are the bones enlivened. We are the resurrection. Amen. Please join me in our traditional words to extinguish our chalice, symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith. We extinguish this flame, but not the light